Every forest on this list looks completely ordinary from the car park. Marked trails, wooden signposts, families walking their dogs. That is the first thing that should worry you, because in every single one of these places, that ordinary appearance has been the last thing seen by someone who did not come back out the other side. Some of these forests have a body count stretching back centuries. Some have a body count from within the last 20 years. One of them has a missing persons file, so strange that the national police force in that country eventually stopped trying to explain it publicly. 10 forests across Europe, all open to the public right now, all still swallowing people, stay for number 1. A forest with a nickname that translates almost exactly to the Bermuda Triangle, and a disappearance rate that has never been adequately explained. Number 10. Grunewald Forest, Berlin, Germany, pronounced Grunewald. Grunewald sits inside Berlin's own city limits, a 20-minute train ride from the center of the German capital, which is exactly why its history unsettles people more than a remote forest would. Beneath its lakes and pine trails is a documented history from the final battle for Berlin in 1945. Retreating soldiers and fleeing civilians died in these trees in numbers that were never fully recorded. Foresters and dog walkers still occasionally report finding wartime debris. On rare occasions, human remains. More than 80 years on, locals describe certain sections near the old Cold War listening station on the Teufelsberg Hill as having an atmosphere that sits wrong, a phrase that comes up in local reporting again and again, without ever being explained. Number 9. Perućica, Bosnia and Herzegovina, pronounced Perućica. Perućica is one of the last primeval rainforests left in Europe. Trees inside it reach heights of over 60 meters. Some are estimated at more than 300 years old, largely untouched, because for decades, almost nobody could safely go in. During the Bosnian War of the 1990s, the surrounding mountains were heavily mined. Years after the conflict ended, demining teams were still recovering active ordnance from the forest floor. Hikers who stray from the narrow cleared paths risk devices laid before some of them were even born. Locals will tell you plainly that the forest has never stopped taking people, just for a different reason than the folklore usually assumes. Number 8. Hoia-Baciu Forest, Romania, pronounced Hoia-Baciu. Outside Cluj-Napoca in Transylvania sits a forest so consistently associated with vanishings that Romanian foresters and hikers have given it a nickname of its own, the most haunted forest in the world. The name Hoia-Baciu comes from a local legend of a shepherd, a Baciu, who entered the forest with 200 sheep and was never seen again. What makes Hoia-Baciu different from ordinary spooky forest folklore is the paper trail. In 1968, a biologist named Alexandru Sift took an aerial photograph over the forest and captured what appeared to be a disc-shaped object above the canopy. A photograph that circulated for decades and turned Hoia-Baciu into a magnet for UFO researchers as much as ghost hunters. Visitors report an unusually high number of sudden unexplained anxiety attacks the moment they cross into the tree line, along with nausea and skin irritation with no obvious environmental cause. Trees inside the forest grow in twisted, contorted shapes that foresters cannot attribute to soil or wind patterns common elsewhere in the region. Multiple hikers over the decades have gone in on marked trails and been reported missing, only to reappear days later with no memory of where they had been. Local authorities do not offer an explanation. They simply confirm that the reports keep coming. Number 7. The Black Forest, Germany. The Schwarzwald covers roughly 6,000 square kilometers of southwestern Germany. Dense enough in places that sunlight barely reaches the forest floor, even at midday, which is the literal origin of the name. This is the forest that gave the Brothers Grimm their material. Children abandoned in the woods, witches in cottages, wolves that are not entirely wolves. Beneath the folklore is a harder statistic. German mountain rescue services log dozens of search operations in the Black Forest's more remote regions every year. A small but persistent number of hikers are never recovered, swallowed by terrain that combines steep ravines, sudden fog banks that drop visibility to almost nothing within minutes, and off-trail sections that all look identical from inside the tree line. Search teams have described the specific danger of the forest not as any single hazard, but as the way it disorients. Compasses and instincts both failing in ways hikers do not expect from a forest so close to well-populated towns. Number 6. Panerai Forest, Lithuania, pronounced Pa-Nehi, 7 miles outside Vilnius. Panerai looks like an unremarkable stretch of pine forest with sandy ravines cut through it. leftover Soviet fuel storage pits originally. Between 1941 and 1944, those pits became mass execution sites. Occupying forces and local collaborators killed an estimated 100,000 people here, the overwhelming majority of them Jewish residents of Vilnius, one of the most significant Jewish communities in pre-war Europe. The forest today is a memorial site, walking paths laid deliberately around the pits rather than through them. Visitors and researchers consistently describe an unnatural quiet in the trees around the ravines. No birdsong locals will tell you, in the specific clearings where the pits are marked, whether that is measurable ecology or something people bring with them into the space. The forest holds one of the highest concentrations of unmarked human remains anywhere in Europe, discovered in fragments during forestry work for decades after the war ended. Number 5. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium and France. Pronounced Ardennes. The Ardennes is enormous, dense, hilly, spanning 3 countries, and it has swallowed armies twice in living memory. In December 1944, it became the battlefield for the Battle of the Bulge, the last major German offensive of the Second World War. Tens of thousands of soldiers, on both sides, died in freezing conditions inside these trees, many of them buried by artillery and snowfall in places that were never fully searched afterward. To this day, the Belgian and French forestry services recover unexploded ordnance from the Ardennes floor every single year, enough that certain sections remain formally restricted. Hikers occasionally still turn up human remains from the battle more than 80 years later. Local guides describe entire stretches of forest where compasses behave erratically, attributed to buried metal from the fighting, rather than anything stranger, though that has not stopped the disappearances from becoming their own regional folklore, layered on top of a wartime death toll that is already almost impossible to process. Number 4. Białowieża Forest, Poland and Belarus. Pronounced Białowieża. Białowieża is one of the last fragments of the primeval forest that once covered the whole of lowland Europe, untouched in parts for over 10,000 years. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, home to Europe's largest surviving population of wild bison, and it sits directly across one of the most fortified and dangerous borders on the continent. Since 2021, the forest has also been the site of an ongoing humanitarian crisis. Migrants attempting to cross from Belarus into Poland have died in these woods in significant numbers, disoriented by identical-looking terrain, marshland that gives way without warning, and a swampy floor that does not forgive a wrong step in freezing temperatures. Polish border guards and humanitarian workers alike describe the forest as deceptively vast, easy to enter, extraordinarily difficult to navigate back out of, ancient enough that GPS signals are unreliable under the density of the canopy. Number 3. Sonian Forest, Belgium, pronounced Soh-Nien. On the southeastern edge of Brussels, the Sonian Forest is startlingly close to a European capital, beech trees stretching for miles, a 20-minute tram ride from the EU quarter. It is also, according to Belgian mental health organizations, one of the most consistently used sites in the country for suicide, a reputation dense enough that local authorities have installed signage with crisis helpline numbers along several of its main paths. Beyond that documented and difficult history, the forest carries older folklore. Reports across generations of hikers losing all sense of direction despite marked trails, a phenomenon locals attribute half-jokingly and half-seriously to the wood playing tricks, search, and rescue volunteers confirm the disorientation is real whatever the cause. Cases of experienced walkers becoming lost within sight of a main road are recorded regularly enough that the forest keeps a standing rescue team on call. Number 2. Karelia's border forests, Finland and Russia, pronounced Karelia. Along the Finnish-Russian border, the vast taiga forests of Karelia hold one of the least discussed disappearance histories in Europe. During the Winter War of 1939 and 1940, tens of thousands of Finnish and Soviet soldiers died in these woods in temperatures that dropped below minus 40 degrees Celsius, many of them freezing in positions where they fell, buried by snowfall before recovery was possible. To this day, Finnish and Russian forestry workers occasionally recover the remains of soldiers from both sides, preserved by decades of permafrost. Hunters and hikers in the deep taiga still report becoming disoriented in terrain that looks identical for kilometers in every direction. Dense spruce, frozen bog, no reliable landmarks, a landscape that swallowed armies once and has never stopped quietly claiming smaller numbers since. Number 1. Bory Tucholsky, Poland, pronounced Bohry-Tucholskaya. In the sandy pine forests of northern Poland, in the historic region of Pomerania, sits a stretch of woodland that Polish media has nicknamed the Trójkąt Bermudzki, the Bermuda Triangle of Poland. Bory Tucholsky is one of the largest forest complexes in the country, and it has one of the most persistent, unexplained disappearance rates of any forest on this continent. Local and national international Polish press have documented dozens of cases since the 1970s. People mostly experienced hikers and mushroom foragers familiar with the area, vanishing without a trace inside clearly marked well-used sections of the forest. Search operations involving hundreds of volunteers and police dogs have in several cases turned up nothing at all. No remains, no belongings, no trail. A minority of the missing have reappeared days or weeks later, disoriented and unable to account for the time that passed, describing nothing more than a sense of having walked in a circle. Polish researchers have proposed everything from unusual magnetic anomalies in the region's soil to simple catastrophic disorientation caused by the forest's flat, repetitive terrain. No official explanation has ever been agreed upon. The disappearances have continued. 10 forests, a city forest in a modern capital still giving up the dead of its final battle, a primeval rainforest that protects itself with buried mines from a war 3 decades gone, a shepherd who never came out, a woods that gave the world its fairy tales about children who don't come home, a memorial forest built around the pits of one of the 20th century's worst atrocities, a battlefield still returning bodies 80 years later, an ancient wood swallowing people fleeing across a modern border, a capital city forest with a darkness of its own, a frozen taiga still giving up soldiers from a war fought when snow was the only witness, and a forest with a nickname borrowed from the ocean. Because on land, there is nowhere else people vanish quite like this. None of these forests need a fence. None of them need a warning sign to keep working. They are simply there, exactly as green and exactly as ordinary looking as they always have been, doing precisely what they have always done to the people who walk in a little too far. If you have walked through any of these forests, or one near you with a story like this, tell me in the comments. I want the ones that never made the news. Subscribe if you want more of this. We go where the map runs out of explanations.